Welcome to our final session of the day, Bolstering U.S. Manufacturing to Increase U.S. Competitiveness Across the Board. Please welcome our panelists, Mr. Samuel R. Allen, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Deere Company, and Chairman, Council on Competitiveness. Mr. Geof Fettig, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Whirlpool Corporation. And the Honorable Deborah L. Wince-Smith, President and Chief Executive Officer, Council on Competitiveness. And please welcome our moderator, Mr. Geof Koss, Editor, Energy and Environment Blog, CQ Roll Call.
Good afternoon, almost evening now. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible because we have a great panel here. I do just want to say that, I cover Congress, and it's been a real treat for me today to be here all day and not there. To be in an environment where things are working, people are nice to each other. But at that, I'd like to just dive in so we can hear what these guys have to say. So, Sam, maybe we could start with you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is you're focusing on at Deere to boost competitiveness here?
I would take it at two levels. Geof and I just came from Business Roundtable today, so we got a heavy dose of the Congress part and frustration that deals with that. But nonetheless, we're still, at one level, we're focused with our policymakers on what they can do to help us, whether it's tax reform, regulatory reform, immigration reform, all of those type of issues. And then specifically in the United States, then at the other level, it's, okay, then what do we do and what can we do? And it ends up, certainly there are a number of areas in manufacturing, design for manufacturing that we keep trying to innovate. It really is also about aligning and engaging our workforce. Do a lot of areas in there to really engage not just manufacturing used to be manufacturing engineers laid it out, assembly people or production people then ended up making it. We're much more in an environment today where everybody gets there together. We talk about the layout together. Everybody then has input into, well, this isn't quite right. Let's do it a little different. And then we put that out on the floor, and then we continually work on improving it. And so we keep working at that level from a manufacturing standpoint, keep trying to assure that we're reducing the cost to manufacture throughout the system. And we have to, in our case, we have everything. We're not real high volume. We have things from just real high volume. We have things from highest volume production is 600,000 a year, but we have a lot of products that are $300,000-$400,000 a unit type products that we make 4 to 1,000 units a year. So we have to be able to also come up with manufacturing processes that work in both those environments. But in all those cases, there's a very collaborative element in terms of driving competitiveness on the floor, involving all our people. And then another component is the design for manufacturability component.
Geof, I see you nodding your head there. Do you want to add to what's your focus at Whirlpool?
Well, many of the same things, because we both make products, we both manufacture products, we sell them globally, but we have a big presence in the U.S. So, for us, it starts with having the best products, and by best, most innovative, best performing, best quality, best cost. That has to do the same point Sam mentioned. It starts up front with design. Manufacturing is an important part of it. You have to design for manufacturing to be able to, in our case, deliver millions of a product. We focus on really all the aspects. Then the product, the in-factory competitiveness of our plants, and the automation and the throughput rates and the quality rates and that sort of thing. Very important for us in competitiveness is logistics costs. So our ability to be close to market in terms of, and things like knowing how many will fit in a truck or how many will fit in a rail car and all that kind of stuff. It's really optimizing the whole value chain from beginning design through with our supply base, through manufacturing, because the only competitiveness that ultimately counts is that we win customers with it. And we make millions, but we sell one at a time. So we try to think through the whole value chain.
Okay. So we've heard a lot today about the 2030 goal of doubling energy productivity. Can you talk, Sam, perhaps a little bit about how does that play into this?
Sure. There's a piece that's just good for the general economy, which if it's good for the general economy, it's going to be good for all of us that manufacture and sell here. So there's that element. There's certainly another element that energy costs is a critical component in our manufacturing costs. It varies based on the type of products and manufacturing processes we have. So it won't be nearly as important for us, for example, in a Greenville, Tennessee plant that makes lawn tractors at $600,000 a year clip, where logistics costs and everything else end up being way more than any of those components. But we happen to have the largest foundry by pour in the world, located in Waterloo, Iowa. The average North American foundry pours 14,000 tons a year. We do that in 11 days. And that foundry is electric arc furnaces. So energy cost becomes a critical component of that, which drives global competitiveness we're competing against a foundry in Germany or a foundry in Brazil, a foundry in Mexico. And the other thing I don't think people fully appreciate about both the reliability of the energy supply and driving down the cost effectiveness of it is that a lot of the type of manufacturing processes that use a lot of energy, they're very, very capital intensive, whether it is a foundry, whether it is a tire facility, whether it is a steel making. And the great thing about that is once you put the investment in, it's not one that you pick up and move to another low-cost country 2 years from now. It's an investment you're putting in for 20 to 40 years. So driving that type of cost competitiveness in energy will also not only be good for the whole country, but it will result in a lot of large capital investment as well, I believe.
Yeah, what do you want to add to that, Sam? I'm sorry, Geof.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think this is consistent with what all of us are trying to do across many sectors of our business. Energy for this country today, what we're thinking about, what businesses thinking about, what the opportunities are, is so radically different than 10 years ago. Energy, most increasing number of people believe, is a potential strong competitive advantage for the country and for industry in general and for manufacturing with the advent of shale gas and new drilling technologies and all this kind of stuff. So, the starting point is, whereas we thought we were going to have a disadvantage as it related to U.S. manufacturing, it should very quickly become an advantage. Secondly, within our factories, doubling the energy goal is a reasonable target given what all of us have been trying to do around consumption, whether it's energy consumption, new investments, our buildings, new buildings that you build. I mean, everything is radically more efficient than what we've replaced. So, and that's an advantage in cost of doing business. The third area for us, which is very big, is in shipping costs, logistics, because now today in our U.S. business, logistics costs are a bigger part of our cost chain than labor and healthcare costs. So, transferring that energy efficiency to the logistics industry is a huge productivity and competitiveness driver. And then lastly, in our case with our products, our company and our industry has been very productive in driving energy efficiency for our products. And we've more than halved the use of energy efficiency in the last 10 years. So everywhere in the chain, this theme of energy efficiency, particularly with the natural resource base that we now know we have that we didn't think we had 10 years ago, I think it's a great opportunity.
Are you concerned about this this growing sentiment to ship that natural gas abroad?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's folks on both sides of that. I think over time, the market will sort itself out. There's big investments required to do that, especially natural gas. And I think there's good arguments on both sides, but in the end, I think the marketplace will decide.
And Sam, you mentioned the capital investments, the intensive capital investments that are necessary for these facilities. Are you confident making those investments now based on the projections of natural gas?
We've been making investments already. Having that energy supply just is an additional plus, as would be a lot of other things that we're talking about. What I might add to what Geof was talking about, and this is not something from me, this actually came from a speaker we had at Business Roundtable this morning. If you think about the energy reserves that have now been discovered between Mexico, U.S., and Canada, and the fact that the three countries have so many similarities and could collectively work so closely together as one body. And then you think about the ability to leverage that from an energy supply standpoint and be a force for good in the world. I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity there. And to just say we're not going to let anybody have it and try to hold it and keep it inside, first of all, it won't drive efficiency. But then I think we miss a great opportunity to be a part of helping drive down energy costs around the world, which would be a positive from a global standpoint.
Just putting natural gas aside for a second, you both have brought up logistics costs several times. Can you talk about the efficiency gains that are possible on that side? What are you realizing right now in helping to reduce some of those expenses from efficiency?
So we share a similar situation to Geof. As a percent, if I go back during my manufacturing career, it was all about labor costs and material supply costs. Logistics costs for us is the same thing. It's more than the labor side now, and second to material costs, it's the biggest one, and it's not very efficient. And there's parts of it that we can design around. So, for example, if we design products 1 inch too wide, we might not be able to containerize them on a ship, and you have to wheel them up on top and double the cost. So those are things, shame on us, we can do and become much more efficient. But if you take the infrastructure in the U.S. and how degraded it is and the impact that's having on ability to send, from an over-the-road truck standpoint, you think about a truck going through Atlanta on its way to one of our manufacturing facilities, let's say to Augusta, Georgia, and it's stuck in traffic for 4 hours in Atlanta, and the fuel burn and everything else, that ends up showing up in your logistics costs. So the ability, however you want to do it, whether you want to build more lanes or whether you want to meter trucks out or whatever, there are a number of different ways in that area that could really drive down logistics costs, much like what I think probably one of the more efficient systems right now from a cost effectiveness standpoint ends up being sending it across the ocean. The shipping lanes have gotten pretty doggone efficient from that standpoint. But there's, I think, a tremendous amount of opportunity within the U.S. to drive down logistics costs if we could get some of the infrastructure, et cetera, fixed.
Obviously, we've heard a lot from the federal government today. What are some of the great opportunities you see for short-term gains on innovation? You want to go ahead with that?
Yeah. I think, innovation is a much discussed word. Every company has it and so on and so forth. And, the question is, what does it really take to drive real innovation? And I do think there is increasingly amount going on, but at the essence, it's the need and it's the knowledge. And so, I think first and foremost, organizations and companies in our case, they have to decide how important innovation is in their business, and are they organized, and do they have the skills for success? And again, every company is a little bit different. Our company came to that conclusion 15 years ago, but once we did, that's when the work began, and we're still working on it. Even though we've built a great, I think, approach and knowledge, and we're having a lot of successes, you innovate enough to know what to try to innovate next. In terms of what help do we need, I think first we got to help ourselves, first and foremost. There are things from a academic government standpoint that help. I mean, partnering with academic research in a structural way rather than ad hoc ways can and has in the past driven a lot of innovation. The government, the simple things that's talked about all the time, tax reform, R&D, making permanent R&D tax credits, so it's not a guessing game every year how much you're going to spend, that you can fund programs rather than annual budgets. And I would just say, the ability to experiment and that sort of thing, and again, depends upon the industry about how structured you are about that, but fast experimentation is another thing that we find is critical to innovation. But most of all, I mean, I'm not going to put it off on anyone else. It starts with us, starts with our organization, our people, us getting the right skills, and us driving it in a very systemic way. With that, there's a lot of other things that can help, but in my mind, it starts with us.
How about you?
Relative to,
Sam, are you...
in the near term innovation?
Yeah.
I start out relative to companies in the near term, the innovation is our own. What I have found through both my council role and here, getting a chance to see it, the further away something is being thought of that can either directly be tied to a customer need and or as a longer time period from commercialization, the less and less you'll find companies willing to do something about it. If it's something's relatively long-term, relative meaning 3 to 5 years out, but you can see a tremendous value, a game-breaking value to the customer, then companies will jump on it in a collaborative fashion with whomever and work on it. Likewise, if it's a customer need and you can commercialize it within a year and you get a payback, you'll drive it. The opportunity, I think that's more companies, and that's more creating an environment that allows companies to more efficiently innovate. I think the opportunity and the other parts of that is how do you, through partnerships, whether it would be with the labs, would be universities, whatever, those areas that are further out and or they're great ideas, yet you don't immediately see how they're going to tie in directly to the customer. That's where I think there's many more opportunities to work on that collaborative part. That ends up creating a hopper of ideas. And part of driving innovation through in the short term is having a hopper of ideas over the long term.
Deborah, do you want to jump in here? I know that you've been on the stage, half the day talking about collaboration, but...
Well, I'll jump in on the innovation piece because I think today, at least from my perspective, and I think from colleagues here, we have been so energized and excited because in spite of some of our challenges in the country now on our slower economic growth and productivity, what we've seen over the last 2 years with this partnership and others is that we really are on the cusp of tremendous transformations driven by our innovation capacity. I mean, I know all of us were thrilled about seeing the 3D electric car, but the discussion around this integration now of the digital, biotechnology, nanotechnology world, the materials we saw in our exhibits today, not just complex additive materials being made into parts, but they actually now have engineered energetic properties into that. So the frontiers are just absolutely before us. And so for our country not to take advantage of our energy abundance now, our tremendous universities and labs, and really still the most productive workforce would be very, very short-sighted. So on the innovation side, I think we need to be talking about speed. The one word I think that permeated so much is we can't wait. We have to do a better job of not just accelerating, but forging these deeper connective tissue among the different parts of the enterprise. To think that the 3D additive car, from design to actual coming out, for us to see it this week was, I believe, 6 months, is really incredible. And so innovation really is the name of the game in the long run for our country. It always has been. And I'll just share one other data point. Over the last 4 years, the council has teamed with Deloitte to do 2 global CEO surveys about what CEOs around the world think's the most important in manufacturing competitiveness. And energy costs and all of this has been an important element. But the number one issue, whether you're talking to CEOs in America or China or Latin America, Europe, is talent-driven innovation. And that's really the differentiator. So these partnerships that we're launching and continuing, and now the one on accelerating energy productivity, really are going to be where our future takes us.
So how does the collaboration that's going on here, how does that compare to what might be happening overseas? Is there an analogous?
Well, I spent a lot of my career working on the whole public-private partnership collaboration, and going back many years ago, was involved when our country passed some pretty significant legislation, the Bayh-Dole Act, that enabled universities to hold title to intellectual property, led to the creation of companies such as Genentech. Everybody around the world still comes to the United States to understand what is that magic that goes on in our innovation ecosystem. Now, we want to do better, and we do think that there's still technology that's stranded, and we can do a better job on cutting the red tape. I mean, one of the things today we heard was that, we joke about our government red tape, but somehow the leadership of Oak Ridge and DOE cut through the red tape. So to get this going. But clearly, other countries are learning, they are accelerating, and they are also investing in the infrastructure for innovation. And I think both Sam and Geof talked about that infrastructure. That's just such an incredible opportunity for our country to deal with, the $2 trillion deficit in infrastructure. Think of the jobs, think of the new materials. We talked a lot this morning, too, about, if we don't move on infrastructure, we won't see the energy productivity, because they're all tied together, as our CEOs are telling us.
Okay. Sam and Geof, you want to add anything to that as far as what you might be seeing overseas?
Well, I don't see, I would agree with Deborah that, I think the best collaboration models I've seen in the world are in the U.S. They're varied, there are many. Sometimes no collaboration is easy. It's hard work, okay? But I think the mindset and examples out there to do it are very evident in the U.S. There is collaboration in other parts of the world. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere in the world we don't collaborate in some areas with certain academic universities, for example, and other organizations. At least from what I see, the mindset and the many different vehicles to do it is just hugely more readily available in the U.S. than what I see in other parts of the world.
We have, we even call them innovation centers, technical, advanced engineering innovation centers. We've got them here in the U.S. Then we have it outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have it in Pune, India, and we have it in Kaiserslautern, Germany, and in Tianjin, China. What's interesting for me, with clearly, and whether it's working with universities or just the ability to bring diverse groups of talent in, have them work together, there's no place like the U.S. to do that. The other place where we're very successful is Germany, and we're very, very successful with the university there, especially in embedded software, and we're doing it very collaboratively. We don't do as well in any of the other markets, though in Brazil, interestingly enough, we are very, very collaborative with a subset of the ag ministry, but it's a governmental entity, not a university entity or something of that nature. But without a doubt, I would just reinforce, I think the U.S. is so much ahead, and I do think there's an element of that. It's so much easier to bring a diverse group of individuals here and get them to work collaboratively, and there are some impediments to that in other parts of the world.
Putting aside regulations or legislation, which at least in the near term is tough in Congress, what would you like? What more would you like to see from the federal government on manufacturing now?
Every time I get an opportunity to talk about that with people on the Hill, first and foremost is certainty. And that's maybe gets to a little bit of the regulatory issue, but I think people lose sight of, just like right now, everybody, we just brought out a new survey from the Business Roundtable. CEOs have significantly reduced capital investment over the next 6 months, even though on average the CEOs said over the next 6 months they think sales are going up. And the only reason they're doing that is no one has an understanding of what's going to happen at the end, with the tax bills and with the extenders. And that uncertainty causes people to hold back, and it's happened time and time again. We've talked about it with the highway bill and other things like that. So at one level, in terms of what could you do for manufacturing, it's create longer-term stability and certainty in what are the rules by which we're going to operate and play the game. Certainly, there are ways those rules can be made much more beneficial. And there are opportunities, whether it's the tax code, for example. But as I mentioned, for me, even though somebody in here, or at least the other day when I said it, they weren't in alignment, I think in the near term, the number one issue would be pass immigration reform. Long term, certainly we got to grow our own, but we're not going to grow enough engineers in 2 years if we got to start fixing the schools, in grade school, whatever. That's for the next decade. And access to talent is one of the critical enablers of running, whether it be more effective designs or whether it be more effective manufacturing.
Geof, what about you? Is there something on your mind that you either didn't hear today that you would have liked to, or you didn't hear enough of?
Yeah. Well, you asked the last question about manufacturing, and I would just add just competitiveness in general, okay? Because I don't know that the government or anybody else needs to do anything special for manufacturing. I do think there's a lot of opportunities across a number of areas where our country, in all walks of commerce, can be much more competitive. Sam mentioned, 1 and 2 on my list. Tax reform. I mean, and again, it's not complaining about taxes. It isn't we shouldn't pay taxes. We are uncompetitive from a global competitive basis. And I don't think there's any dispute about that. Immigration. Share has saying comments about talent. We can attract terrific talent to this country. We educate terrific talent in this country, but can't keep it. And there's many other things that obviously get into societal questions, but we need a sensible immigration laws. And then third and fourth for me, kind of extending down that are, regulatory costs are uncompetitive, or they're a significant challenge that U.S. manufacturers have to overcome to be competitive on a world level. And again, no one's saying that we shouldn't have regulation. I think everyone is saying we could have a lot more sensible regulation, which what I would say does not have to be as costly as it is today. And then the last point, I think particularly growing concern in this country is infrastructure. This country was built over the last 100 years, and the investments in infrastructure over the last 30 years has not kept up with not only normal wear and tear, but also with the changing, growing nature of our country and of commerce. And I think for many reasons, but for manufacturers that ship products that need, time is being compressed. Sam mentioned about, if you got to drive around Atlanta, it takes 4 hours. That's a cost of doing business, but also the time aspect. People aren't carrying inventories anymore. And so your ability to flex to the market, we need good roads, we need good bridges, we need good ports. And that's where some of these emerging economies that are building everything new for the first time, and they're growing, are getting quickly catching up with what historically has been a great advantage for this country, which is just fundamental infrastructure. So those would be the four on my top of mind, and I think all four will help this country to be very competitive.
What about longer term? Are there some trends that maybe out past 5 years you see on the horizon that that need to be addressed in some fashion?
Well, I think for developed markets, all of us need to address our demographics. The United States is aging. Europe is aging. Japan has aged and is aging. And a lot of people don't realize this. China is aging. So with radically changing demographics, you can anticipate most of the trends. It's difficult for people to do it because it will be a different demographic setup with many implications that tell you that we should be dealing with certain issues today, including having a workforce to support an aging population. So, I guess the number one thing from a country, from a competitiveness, economic growth standpoint, I think really from a long-term standpoint, understanding the impact of what the population demographic trends are and what's the implications of that 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, because I think they're pretty profound.
Deborah, do you want to jump in on that?
Well, I would, of course, endorse what my colleagues are saying here, but I would add one other area, well, maybe two. One is, of course, and this doesn't require legislation at this point. It may at the end of the day with, the ratification, but our country really needs to move aggressively out on the global trade front. We've been a leader in the post-World War II and on in liberalizing markets. It's had a huge economic advantage to the world and the U.S. And we need to accelerate that and bring down not only the trade barriers, we heard about some of them yesterday at the National Competitiveness Forum, but let's just take an example in China, huge market. Most of our enterprises are there, and yet now, the Chinese are using competition policy as a non-tariff barrier to keep out, competitive firms that are ahead of theirs in terms of innovation and things. So I think our government has to take, with private sector support, really aggressive leadership on the trade front. And then the other area that, again, is very much part of logistics supply chain and the whole transformation of manufacturing and energy is everything is cyber-enabled and the whole cyber infrastructure. And not just the fragility of it, but the whole cybersecurity is a huge issue. And this is, again, an area where with our universities, our national labs, national security establishment, working with our private sector, we can really do a much better job, I think, without additional resources to actually capitalize on what we have to make those systems more resilient and really move out aggressively against cyber attacks, because talking about disruption and all of that is huge. And so moving out on global trade, getting the Trans-Pacific Partnership done, and the infrastructure, including cyber, would be, two that I would add to the overall tax, regulatory, and other workforce issues.
Sam and Geof, I think you both said you were up on the Hill this week. In the themes that you bring up or have been going on for years, what's the response that you're getting from people when you're up there, as far as a window of opportunity for addressing these in the near term, longer term?
I'll try to add on. I've been in this role now 5 years, a little over 5 years, and it has just consistently got worse and worse and worse. And I think it's eroded even at an accelerated rate over the last year, since 2012 for sure. And you're seeing, even in a very friendly format, when congressmen from either side of the aisle, senators, congressmen come in, those that have been there long periods of time you can just see they're extremely frustrated, they're extremely down, and it's, they'll all start out, but they've never seen it like this. They'll all, before it's done, they'll try to work themselves back into, but we know we can do better and we're going to have to do better, and some will say we might be able to do it in a lame duck. More will say we might be able to do it with the next, after the elections in 2014. But it's, the tone right now is, if you're in a good mood and very optimistic and you want to get down, just go talk to some senators and congressmen, and you'll come out of there saying, oh my goodness. And I'd like to say it's something different, but it's not. It's just very down.
Well, welcome to my world.
Yeah. I'd say the same thing. The only other maybe perspective I would add is, I think everyone would be privately and even publicly say it's just a non-working organization right now in terms of the ability to do things and progressive things. But almost no matter what issue we bring up, it is interesting to see there isn't that much, if any, difference about what one group thinks versus the other. So I think the issues are well known. I think the solutions are fairly well flushed out, but the action is just not happening. Now, on the other optimistic note, if we ever get a working government, again, to address these issues, the upside for this country is enormous. It's just, it truly is, because we're right now in complete stalemate.
Yeah, I guess it sort of illustrates something that struck me today. It's the importance of partnerships, because it is working, and I'm sure you would agree, Deborah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, moving outside of Washington, we continue to see that the states are really innovation laboratories. The governors across both parties are doing some very important and future-oriented both investments and partnerships with the private sector around infrastructure and education. And we have some challenges around, state support for our great universities, but as cities emerge more and more to be the locus of so much economic power, we're even seeing a shift away from in some ways, the importance of the centralized system. Not so much in the U.S., but you see this in other parts of the world where the city-state is emerging in a way where they can do things that can't be done, as easily at the national level. So part of our partnership with the Department of Energy, Assistant Secretary Danielson, has been to take all this work out around the country, and we've had tremendous response wherever we've had our dialogues and our summits, bringing together regional leaders and from both political parties to work on things in their states. So I think that's a positive trend and one we want to accelerate, but of course we still have to come back to our gridlock in the American Congress.
Sam, are you seeing that, though? Are the states more conducive as far as a working government to
Without a doubt.
Some of your needs?
Without a doubt. But that again came up today, and it's why there can be an argument made that governors may be the best candidates for a president because they're held accountable and they have to drive results and they're measured. And they, at the end of the day, whatever they're going to approve, they got to pay for it. They don't get to float, paper like we do here, which allows you to delay the accountability. So as a result, you find states experimenting a lot more, and they're doing it totally different ways. It's not everybody doing it the same way, but it's, it was interesting. There was a comment made today, and it dealt with health care, and it said, why would we think that we could go in with a health care program and it's one size fit all? And so what's right for South Dakota is also right for New York and New York City. Given all the demographic changes, how things are laid out, everything, you need to have more flexibility. And that's, the states, when you entrust that leadership team to, okay, what's the best way to deliver that result, it's going to be a little bit different answer on most of these issues, depending on your state and how much is rural, et cetera, your natural resources. And at the end of the day, what will happen there is if they don't do it well, they'll get voted out. But, whether it be education reform, whether it be creating great climates for research, North Carolina, I think what they did back when with the Golden Triangle, it's still paying dividends to this day, and so there are things like that out there that we see. We see differences in the states in which we operate in. Our headquarters in Illinois, we've got a factory in Illinois, we've got a number of plants in Iowa. I'm gonna tell you, they're vastly different in how business friendly they are. And as a result, you'll see more of our investment in Iowa compared to Illinois, and even in renewing plants.
So we just got a couple of minutes left, and I want to ask both of you, and Deborah, you can chime in as well. What is it, aside from regulations and the political climate right now, what is it that keeps you up at night thinking about the future in manufacturing?
Well, my comment about keeping, the only thing that keeps me up at night is when I know there's something I should be doing and I haven't done it yet. And so, and I'm sure Sam's business the same way. This is a globally competitive world, and everybody is getting better. And we compete with everybody everywhere. So, our view is, and again, I do think it starts at home first. In the case, it starts in our company first. It's our job to ensure that we're competitive, and we got to make sure we're making the right investments, the right tools, the right training in our people, and on and on and on. So some of it's step change, new technologies, new facilities, new processes, and some of it's just really strong continuous improvement. But it's always got to be on. And the other thing you know over time is you never get there. Because whatever there is always another level of competitiveness and productivity and innovation. And so, I don't think it keeps me up at night, but I think in our company we've learned through competition and through our own history that, if we're not getting better every day, we're going to fall behind. And so you got to have that mindset and then support it with tools, processes, people, management systems, and investment. And if you do that, in our kind of business, we get measured every day. We either have better products and sell more, or we don't. And if we don't, then that might be the reason why.
Sam, you want to take a stab at that?
I heard someone make this comment today relative to political leadership here and in many, many important countries around the world. I sleep like a baby. I sleep for 2 hours and then I get up and cry. Then I go back to sleep for 2 hours and then I cry. Wake up and cry. That's probably, if I think about it, that's, you know, what keeps me up at night as it relates to manufacturing. We've got plants in Russia. I was there 3 weeks ago. Am I going to be able to keep them? Are we going to be able to run them? We've got plants in Argentina. Overnight, they changed the rules. Are you know, and you don't build a plant based on a rule change, and they change. We've got elections in Brazil. What are they going to do to all the different issues we've got going there? Same thing in China. So I think probably more than at any point in my 39-year career, that those dynamics and the willingness of people and all over to do tit for tat and be protectionist. And when you're in the manufacturing side, it's a big investment, and you're thinking over 20-year horizons. And now, when someone changes the barrier on that investment, it really does impact you. So you're almost. The example I'll give you is a few years ago when we went into Russia again with our second plant. Because we were so uncertain about it, we ended up saying, how can we put everything on wheels and limit the amount of fixed asset in place, because we don't know. And that's not how to run a manufacturing operation over the long term when you're in the type of manufacturing we are. But that's kind of what you end up having to do.
Well, we're out of time, and I don't want to delay happy hour or dinner for anyone, and I know that there's going to be some more closing remarks, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.